Hey, it's Mazzy. I'm going to talk about Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind, one of his best albums, one of the best albums and one of the greatest comeback albums of any artist. And Bob Dylan has made a lot of comeback albums. And this is kind of to celebrate, to give a little announcement about the Bob Dylan Bootleg Series number 17, Bob Dylan's Fragments, the Time Out of Mind Sessions. This is the 1996 to 1997 sessions that brought us this amazing comeback album, Time Out of Mind. Now, a little asterisk I put here because a lot of Dylan freaks will be watching this possibly, thinking, who's this wanker talking about Bob Dylan? I know more about Bob Dylan than you do. You probably do. There's a lot of people. Dylanologists and Dylan collectors are like Grateful Dead people. They have tapes and downloads and bootlegs, and they know every version of this song and that song and every concert tape that's out there, like Grateful Dead people. I'm all in on the Grateful Dead since the beginning, and I've been all in on Bob Dylan since 1964, okay? I collect all the Dylan proper records in the bootleg series, but I'm not one, even though I have some bootlegs and downloads and things. I'm not one that's all in and knows every little version. And you go on these forums when these Grateful Dead box sets come out and the live things that David Lumiere curates and puts together, the archivist for the Grateful Dead, or the Dylan people put together. And you see them, their heads exploding. They forgot this song and that song, and I have to buy this version and that version. I know I'm digressing here, but that's just my little intro. I'm coming from the music, the curation of these official releases, and that's what I like. I want to put an album on by Bob Dylan or any artist and enjoy it. I don't think, oh, they forgot that. They should have done that. Even with the Beatles, I rarely do that. So let me just do a little background on this record. 1997. Dylan hadn't done a record since Red Sky, original record, a recording of original songs since Red Sky in 1990. So he brings back Daniel Lanois as a producer. He had worked with Daniel on Oh Mercy. He wanted an old sort of, he likes 50 blues, 50 rock and roll. He wanted sort of that organic sound. Ironically, after this, he wasn't too happy with the production, although I think it really works wonderfully on this. And I'll talk about that with when I get into the bootleg series number 17, because there is a remix included there. After this, all the subsequent albums were produced by Jack Frost, which is Bob Dylan's pseudonym. And so he self-produces his album. He has the sound he wants. This was recorded with his touring band. A lot of other Jim Keltner's on it, Augie Meyer, Jim Dickinson. This is a fantastic album, and it was a comeback. It hit the top 10 in the United States. It has a great kind of a blurry, artsy cover picture by the photographer Mark Seliger, produced again by Daniel Lanois in association with Jack Frost Productions. This is considered one of his best albums, and it started a series of amazing albums he's done since. In the last 20 years, his albums are just amazing and personal, and a whole different, yet another direction for Bob Dylan. So I'm really excited that this is the upcoming Bootleg 17 system, Bob Dylan Fragments. Now just a little bit of business. It's coming in several configurations. There's a 5 CD superset that has everything, all the outtakes, the remix. So he's remixed it. It's been remixed, probably stripping away some of the Daniel Lanois-ish effects. I love his production. I like what he did with Emmylou Harris on Wrecking Ball, with Willie Nelson on Teatro, even some of the U2 stuff. There is a sound when you go to Daniel Lanois. There's certain producers, when you go to T-Bone Burnett, you get that sound. So if you don't like that sound, you don't go to those people. There's also a 2 CD deluxe set, so you can kind of strip down and get that. A 4 LP vinyl set, which you can get pretty much everywhere, and a mammoth 10 LP vinyl offering. And that is only available at the Bob Dylan store. It will sell out. And it's $235. And $235 these days for 10 records and a booklet is, I think it's pretty amazing. Here is what the 5 CD deluxe set looks like. So it's got a booklet, and this is what the 10 LP set. And before you ask, yes, I have pre-ordered it. Again, I'm all in on Dylan. And I'm going to show my vinyl Bob Dylan bootleg series things just briefly and get into them. Dylan's one of the few artists that he would go through an entire, he could do 10, 20, 30 versions sometimes of songs, and they'd be completely different keys, different tempos, different arrangements. And every one is brilliant and better in some cases than most other artists' final work. But you realize, even though it may pique your interest when you hear a version of Like a Rolling Stone, for instance, on the bootleg series number 12, which I'll showcase in a bit, you see why the one he picked is the one. Now, of course, we've heard it over 50 years, so we're used to it, and we know that's the way it should have been. But, the brilliance of Dylan in changing things up. It's, again, famous with Blood in the Tracks, where he re-recorded, half the album at least, because he just didn't like the feel and everything. We have that on the bootleg series as well. So the Time Out of Mind, a fantastic album by a great artist. Okay, the whole bootleg series of Bob Dylan really started with this in 1991. This is an amazing collection. This is the vinyl version. I didn't originally have this on CD. This is the height of the CD era, and it was reissued some years later on vinyl. This is volumes 1 through 3, Rare and Unleashed, Bob Dylan. So this is really an overview. I don't think they really thought about or knew that they were going to do these ongoing bootleg series. The success of this obviously helped, and the change in demographics and Dylan fans wanting and demanding. Of course, Dylan way back put out the Basement Tape because he was one of the first artists that was heavily bootleg and vinyl. Him and the Beatles with Let It Be, Get Back, that era. This is a really kind of great overview because this pretty much covers an entire first 30 years of artistry and record making and outtakes, and it's really a wonderful, wonderful collection. So Bob Dylan, the bootleg series, volumes 1 through 3, 1961 to 1991. Bootleg series volume 4 is one of my all-time favorite live recordings of Bob Dylan. That's Bob Dylan live in 1966 at the Royal Albert Hall, the Royal Albert Hall concert. Fantastic concert. This has the electric and the acoustic, and just, one of the best recordings, one of the best sounding. This is that classic Dylan we all know. And he goes from his electric stuff, leopard skin pillbox hat, Just Like a Woman, Like a Rolling Stone. This Vision of Johanna, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue acoustic, Desolation Road, Just Like a Woman, live, Royal Albert Hall. What's great about the bootleg series too, it jumps around in time. You don't have subsequent orders every year. It's another one's released every 2 years, another one's released. It doesn't go in order. So it jumps around here in 1975. This is the Rolling Thunder Review. I did see part of this tour, one of the shows in Austin, Texas. They didn't really come west where I was on this tour. This is that circus-like atmosphere of the Rolling Thunder Review. Joan Baez, Roger McGuinn, Mick Ronson, Dave Mansfield, T-Bone Burnett, just a great array of artists. And it turned into, there was that 4-hour film, Ronaldo and Claire, which I remember seeing at the Castro Theater in San Francisco. Bored as hell. It's probably 3 hours too long. I'm all in on Dylan, but it's kind of like, it's worth seeing if you're a Dylanite. I remember the Hard Rain live album came out. When it first came out, I thought it was almost too intense, but it turns out it's one of the great live albums. Again, he's made so many great live albums. It's sort of a punk album. What's interesting about it's 2 years after his return with the band, 1974 tour, but just him with this white pancake face makeup doing these songs. Obviously Hurricane, he would perform on stage, after Blood in the Tracks, after Desire. What's great about these, they all come with these wonderful books, which I'm not going to go through specifically anytime, but it's richly photographed, usually really wonderful essays. And a favorite of mine, it's the live shows from the Rolling Thunder Review. Just a great, great kick-ass. Just, he was intense. I saw him so many times in the 70s, and the intensity was just great here. He had something to say, and he just wanted to say it. Rewriting or reinterpreting his songs in a totally different way. The next one, Bootleg Series number 6, Bob Dylan Live concert at the Philharmonic Hall in New York. This one I only have on CD for some reason. I suspect there is a limited vinyl, but I don't know, and I haven't researched it lately. So if there is, give me a shout out or send it to me. I'll give you my address. I need to search it out. 1964. This is an interesting time. Dylan had recorded his first album just a couple years before that. He was in that protest mode. Kennedy being shot, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened the year before. A lot of political shit going on. This is a live show. He brings his protest songs. This is where, people on the right were against him. People on the far left were against him. He was doing these songs like Times Are Changing, Spanish Harlem Incident, him and the guitar. Joan Baez shows up here. This whole series, put together by Steve Berkowitz from Legacy, Columbia, in the archive at Columbia Records, and Jeff Rosen at the time, who later would go on to head Apple Records for the Beatles in London and help curate theirs. So, the Beatles have sort of taken a cue from Legacy with Steve Berkowitz and Dylan Archives and the Byrds Archives and Miles Davis Archives. So we really owe a lot to them for these other archive sets. This is a 2 CD set, again, with a lovely booklet. But this is a really also special time for Dylan. The early folk singer, really just coming on his own nationally. I didn't hear of Dylan till probably late 63, 64. I didn't quite get it. 64, I started getting it. Obviously, Blown in the Wind I had heard. But I had heard the Peter, Paul, and Mary songs early on. Those were that, quote, safe songs. And certainly most of my friends, parents, and myself weren't listening to Bob Dylan. I remember being a very young boy, probably 7 years old, 8 years old, and hearing some kid say, "I put bubblegum in my food." And he kept saying that. I had no idea what he was talking about. But obviously, years later, I would know it's kind of a more or less from an early Bob Dylan song. Bob Dylan Bootleg Series number 7, Bob Dylan, No Direction Home, the soundtrack, Martin Scorsese film, picture, film, cinema. This one's a different beast. This is almost going back to like the first 1 through 4, the overview, because this is from that documentary that was done by Scorsese. That's kind of a really cool overview of Bob Dylan, maybe not the definitive look, but it's a good intro to see the world of Bob Dylan. And, whatever you think about Scorsese documentary, I'm not a fan of his George Harrison thing. I think it concentrated too much on Beatles and less on his solo work, but c'est la vie. I love The Last Waltz. I was at The Last Waltz. But this is kind of a great overview as well, and it has home recordings, alternative takes, again, mostly from that early 60s period. And of course, it's nice to also to see the archival photographs in these books, alternate takes that were on album covers, session photographs, essays, just a wonderful, wonderful archive. Again, this whole series is all about archival, the archive of Bob Dylan, solidifying Bob Dylan. So when you get through all these records, you have these various outtakes and alternate versions of Volume 7, the Bootleg Series Deluxe LP Edition, Martin Scorsese motion picture, the film by Martin Scorsese. All these are available or have been available on compact discs in various truncated versions, and in some cases, more expanded versions than the vinyl versions that I'm showing here. This is a good time to bring up Heads Exploding in Dylan Collector period. The new Time Out of Mind set, the new set that's coming out, has some of these outtakes on that. They're repeating some things from this on that. So you have to buy these things again. People's heads are exploding in some sectors. Why do we have to buy that again? Well, look, when they're putting out the Time Out of Mind set that's coming out, number 17, You can't leave things off when you're doing an archival issue of a specific album of recordings from that time. You can't just because we put them on this comp, 10, 15 years ago, we can't put them on now. We have to have this comp complete. Can you imagine if there was a comp that came out with, well, the anthology, the Beatles anthology had certain, songs from all their albums. So when they put out the Sgt. Pepper comp, they're not going to leave something off, some great outtake off when they put out the Sgt. Pepper comp as a release all onto itself. You have to do that. So it's not a major thing. And also, not everyone has that comp. So it's not about you. It's about the Dylan archive. Okay? Mazzy says his piece right there. This has songs from Time Out of Mind, as I said, Oh Mercy, Modern Times, some live tracks from the early 2000s, 2002, Live at the Supper Club, 1993. This is a little potpourri mix. I love this. It's kind of a nice version of, in a way, to a lot of people, a lost period of Bob Dylan. I think a lot of people fell off the train. Maybe Oh Mercy they were on. After that, they weren't really following it along. But this, again, another great overview of Bob Dylan, another great set. There's Mark Seliger from that cover shot from Time Out of Mind. But some great stuff. Again, there's part of the band from the Time Out of Mind sessions. A great thing. So there is overlap from this new 17 release to going back to number 8. Number 8, Bob Dylan. The Bob Dylan Bootleg Series number 9, the Whitmark sessions. The Whitmark's demos are demos he did, publishing demos, when you would record songs to try to get other people doing it. And these are early recordings, 1962 to 1964. So these are recorded in a studio, demos for other artists to pick up on to use the songs. Very much like the basement tapes of Music at Big Pink with the band. He did all these tons of songs, and they put them out for other artists like Man for Man doing Quinn the Eskimo pretty much before we heard Bob Dylan do it, and several other songs. This is the same kind of thing. And again, this is an important historic document as well. And some of these songs that Joan Baez would do on her double album in 1968, she recorded, I think it was in Nashville, of the Dylan songs, Any Day Now. These great, great songs. Obviously, songs you heard of Dylan and some that you hadn't heard at the time. Again, the Whitmark sessions has, like everything else, demos of sessions of these great recordings of Bob Dylan, great essays on this whole document. So an important early document of Bob Dylan, a good archive. Again, this is the one that has more of the earliest sessions that we have in the Bootleg series of Bob Dylan here. Bob Dylan, this is number 9, the Whitmark demos. Controversial. The writer, the essayist, the great writer, Greil Marcus, wrote a review for Rolling Stone when Self-Portrait came out, and I'm paraphrasing here, I think. It's basically, what the fuck is this shit? Or what is this shit? Self-Portrait. This is another self-portrait. This is the Bootleg Series number 10. Now, I am not just saying this after the fact. When that album came out, there's a lot of covers. It started out with All the Wild Horses with those female singers that opens up that record, which I love. Dylan, this is after the whole motorcycle accident, his comeback, his voice had a little change, Nashville Skyline, in and out around this time. I like that record. He does a version of The Boxer, right? Isn't that on that album? Some people think, what the fuck is this? I love that record. Well, Greil Marcus didn't, and many other people did. A lot of people thought up to that period it was the worst Bob Dylan album. That could be true. But worst is relative when you're talking about Bob Dylan. Now, another self-portrait came out, 1969-1970, Bootleg Series Volume 10, and it got a reevaluation, and now a lot of people like this stuff, surprisingly. He's up in Woodstock area, he's upstate New York. Is he retired? Has he disappeared? Is he dead? What's going on? This is a fantastic set. Again, you know, the usual essay stuff. He's sitting by the river. He's chewing on a piece of grass. He's hanging out. He's, you know, he works on this album. Is Dylan influenced by Elvis? What is going on with Bob Dylan up here? You know, he's just hanging around upstate New York. So Bob Dylan, another self-portrait. I talked about bootlegs earlier. 1969, 1970. Bob Dylan's Great White Wonder came out as a bootleg. Soon after that, the Beatles, Get Back. The vinyl bootleg industry started. Trademark Equality and the other bootleg labels. You'd find records. This was new to us. This is new to us. You find records of unreleased material. Of course, the Basement tape wouldn't come out till, 74, I believe, 75, officially, with that great cover with the band and Dylan and the circus strongman. And this is the band, Dylan, the band, the Basement tapes, recorded up by, again, Woodstock, New York, Big Pink. Garth Hudson would record these things from the band, and these would be demos, and these would be songs for publishing songs that would go out, which I mentioned, like the Widmark tapes, demos, songs that would, you know, we know now that are infamous songs. The band records, and Manfred Mann, and so many others. This Wheels on Fire. This is a fantastic set. This is one of the better ones, I think, too. This is Bootleg Series number 11, Bob Dylan and the band, the Basement tapes. Again, another fun design, almost as if they were demos and acetates in terms of the cover art. This has a recording tape, a CD included. Some of these at the time, before the big vinyl revival, would include sort of hybrid CD versions. So if you didn't want to buy the CD and this, I mean, things are different now, obviously, as we know. But these are acetates, things that would go out to publishing companies too. So you get this acetate feel of it. And of course, again, another wonderful book. And this is that image John Berg designed the cover originally on the Basement tapes. That's stripped out and taken from that cover photograph. And of course, this was it Elliot Landy. I think Elliot Landy photographed this. Just a great time, some amazing photographs of him up in Woodstock at the time with the band in New York at Big Pink. You can actually rent that house now, I think, on Airbnb. This is one that has probably some of the best photographs. Here's a good example of all the artists that covered these songs, pretty much before Dylan in most cases. So Bob Dylan and the band, the Basement tapes, Bootleg Series number 11. I almost was going to say that 1965, 66 are the most prolific time of Bob Dylan's career for me. I think it was a time because it was a dramatic change. Dylan goes electric, and he made these 3 albums in something like 18 months, I believe it was. These 3 amazing albums. So you got Bringing It All Back Home, Highway 61, and Blonde on Blonde. Highway 61 and Blonde on Blonde are probably my 2 favorite Bob Dylan albums of all time. Again, we have this kind of Columbia generic vintage covers, which are really beautiful. They're just really lovely designed. These came with CDs as well originally. And of course, this wonderful book that showcases this period. What a time. This is like classic Dylan. Beyond the folk singing protest songs of Blowin' the Wind and Times They Are Changin', this was a powerful time. This was a time when Dylan pissed off his folkies, where Dylan goes electric, that we have this classic Dylan looking like that, which is so amazing. So I think this is, again, one of the most important sets. If you have to get one, this is one to get. But if you are a completist like me, this is the one. And you felt that tug right there, that because I had to lift with my legs to get this up. When this came out, this was $600. Now I think it's well over 1,000 beyond. A limited edition. This is Bob Dylan, Volume 12, the complete cutting edge. Now, this is not for the faint of heart. This is not for someone who's just a casual Dylan fan. This is not even for someone, most Dylan fans can't take this. When you have, was it 10, 15, 20 ongoing versions after another, like a Rolling Stone, different tempos, different speeds, different arrangements. You see Al Cooper with that, his chord, his organ, that great riff that he develops in that song. You hear that great lead by Mike Bloomfield on here. You hear the talkback in this. I'm not going to go through this whole box because it's so friggin' intense, but to me, this is one of the prizes of my collection, and it has vellum. So much packed in this book, and so much packed. There's several books. There are 45s, picture sleeves, essays, but it's the music. It's the music. All the versions of these songs, the development of these songs. It's like looking at, a painter's sketchbook, Da Vinci's sketchbooks, and it's Bob Dylan, some of the greatest albums ever made. This is the complete overview and development of these songs. You hear how these songs were developed, how they were recorded, how they came to be the versions we heard. Now, again, as I said earlier, some of these versions, these alternate versions, are like, God, that's wonderful. Why didn't they use that version? But when you really hear the final versions, we realize that Dylan was as prolific as he was, and he knew when he got it. And I think, for the most part, he picked the right one. But it's still fun to hear these versions. And people say, well, how often do you play that? I have all these CDs loaded up, and every once in a while I put them all in my car, and I drive around for like a month just listening to this stuff, maybe every 18 months or so, and it's fabulous. I'm all in on Bob Dylan, and number 12, pretty great. In 1969, I remember Bill Graham produced a week-long series of Bob Dylan at the Warfield Theater. He hadn't been around for a while, so that was kicking off his new tour and his what was going to be his new album. I bought tickets to 3 of the shows, the opening night and subsequent shows that week. This is when Slow Train came out, and he was really into his Christianity, his born-again Christianity period. And he played all songs from the album, plus songs that hadn't been recorded yet, which would be on subsequent albums, Shot of Love, and the other one, Saved, is that it? Saved. People booed. Some people walked out. It kind of was a reminiscent of when it goes electric. He didn't play one secular song. He didn't play one of his hits. It was all the Christian period. They were a little funky. I was amused, but some people were really upset. I went to 3 of the shows. I did go to one of the later shows. One of the nights, Mike Bloomfield showed up and played with them. Again, this changed it all for me, too. I like Slow Train Coming. I didn't really care for the second and third of the Christianity period. I like them a little more now. But this is all live. And hearing how the tour progressed and how tight they came with these gospel singers, this is an amazing set. This is a surprising set. This blew me over how powerful it was and how just dramatic it was. And he would later take on and do some of his secular songs, some of his older songs, and reinterpret them somewhat. And this is an amazing record. Those are the 3 albums of that of Bob Dylan Goes Christian period. Was a really powerful time for Dylan personally, and he went through a different take, and then he kind of returned to Judaism. Had a son bar mitzvah at the Wailing Wall in Old Jerusalem, but an important part of the story, the Bob Dylan story. Probably the best sounding album Dylan has ever recorded is Blood in the Tracks in 1974. Just a crystal clear recording and beautiful acoustic guitars and great songwriting. Another one of his comebacks in a way. But he re-recorded part of the songs. He recorded in New York and Minneapolis, but he decided just before the release to change some of the songs. And More Blood, More Tracks brings those other versions together. So volume 14 of the Bootleg series is More Blood, More Tracks. For volume 15, Bootleg series of Bob Dylan, we get Travelin' Through. This is from 1967 and 1969. Now, the irony is John Wesley Harding is covered on this record. I love that record. It's very a low-key record, almost, it's very folksy and very country-ish and very sparse. And the irony is that that came out right in the midst of all this psychedelia of Jefferson Airplane and Sergeant Pepper and the Doors and everything. And Dylan goes completely opposite direction, retreats from the high-end electric stuff he was doing, the intensity, and, gets more of a bare bones type of thing, which is really a wonderful record. Of course, out of that came All on the Watchtower, a song that I think a lot of people didn't even notice until Jimi Hendrix covers it the following year. But this is great because it has some outtakes from John Wesley Harding from Nashville Skyline, that period that Dylan's voice all of a sudden became something completely different. And we were gobsmacked with hearing Lay Lady Lay. And of course, these recordings he did for the television show when he was working with Johnny Cash. And the duets on the Johnny Cash show that was on television in America are really great to hear them all together. I mean, in a way, when you hear them do Girl in North Country and a few of the other things, it almost seems like he's chasing to keep on key. It's not your typical country folk harmonies at all. Dylan's voice is very unique. Johnny Cash's is deep and unique. And they almost fight each other, but they work beautifully together. This is a 3 LP set traveling through from that period of those 2 albums and the Johnny Cash sessions. And it's just a nice 3-record set here. I love this one. This is a good one too, as you know from hearing this entire series. And I'm going to end this just prior to number 17, which will be coming out subsequently. We go back to this period. Bob Dylan, this is Bootleg Series number 16, 1980 to 1985. And this was a little bit of a unique release, the way they structured this. And not sure it was a good idea, but they did it, and that's how they did it. This is alternate takes from Infidels, Shot of Love, Empire Burlesque. This is a 2 LP series that came out working on those albums. I don't know if this is this is probably the least successful for me, although I still enjoy it because I'm all in on Dylan, as I said, so I do enjoy it. But then there was an edition, a 4 LP edition that was only put out by Third Man Records, Jack White's company. So you had to order directly and it sold out like that. So it's volume 16, 1980 to 1985. It expands, it has more cuts, like License to Kill Live on the David Letterman Show, alternate takes from Empire Burlesque, and just more of the same. Still a cool album, and of course, if you're a Dylan all-in, this is required listening and should be in your collection. And it has, more of a lower-keyed book than the rest of Columbia, but still, I mean, it tells you what you need to know, track by track listing with a few photographs. Less curated than the other ones, less elaborate, but it goes through each cut and you get a good overview of each cut and where it comes from, what Dylan was doing at the time. So New York, the mid-80s, early to mid-80s period. So anyway, that's an overview of the Bootleg series, the vinyl versions of the Bootleg series of Bob Dylan, the great archive of this great master. So I just want to end with this video, a little overview, so you can see what this thing's all about. You can see the animation, the CG animation of Bob Dylan's Bootleg series number 17 that comes out, I believe, in January. So again, if you're interested in this, the 10 LP vinyl version, I'd order it today from the Dylan side. Otherwise, it's going to disappear. But if you just want a little sampling, you got other options. So it's not a all in, you have to be all in. If you're a Dylan fan, you know what I'm talking about. So thanks for watching. And I appreciate it. Bob Dylan, God. And his book. Check out his book on where he talks about 60+ songs. I love it. Thanks for watching. Please comment. Please subscribe. It helps me. It helps me make more of these. Won't you help? Mazzy loves you.